And we've been excited for this movie for years. The ride over to this movie felt like I was going to Infinity War again.
Yeah.
It felt really, really exciting.
Dude, here's another record that it set. IMDb rating 9.1 out of 10. This is the highest rated superhero movie right now on IMDb.
And they captured the cultural values of different Spider-Men in their character designs and in their set design, in the design of their world.
It felt very like teenage rebel vibe, you know, of like, you tell me no, and here I am. Yeah, it's like such an obvious twist. Like, it's literally right there in front of us. But I didn't catch on to it. Welcome to Backseat Directing,
where we talk about movies, TV shows, comics, and more.
We're your hosts,
Andrew
and Aaron.
And we put out new episodes every Monday and Thursday.
And on this episode, we're discussing Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse.
3, 2, 1, action. Why do we even need the music?
Yeah, I mean, we can just do it ourselves. We should do that one time where the whole intro is just us.
Bum, bum, bum.
Bum, 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 bum.
So, Aaron, we're filming this episode, like you said, super excited. Like, this is a huge, huge
most anticipated movie of the year, probably. For me, at least.
It might be my most anticipated movie for like a 5-year run of movies because,
jeez, yeah,
just
wow,
like
that's high.
I remember the week up to this, every single day we were like, it's another day closer to Spider-Verse.
Yep.
And we've been excited for this movie for years, ever since the first one came out. And just like the ride over to this movie felt like I was going to Infinity War again.
Yeah.
It felt really, really exciting.
I feel like the last time I was this excited to go watch a movie was the Batman from last year.
I was so excited. That was,
the trailer was pumped
really good.
up for the Batman. We were talking about it, just like you said for this one. We were talking about it, counting down the days, like, all right, it's Wednesday. We're going to see it tomorrow. Let's go.
But if you listen to the show, for a while, we love Into the Spider-Verse. We hold it in like this upper echelon of movies, like this dreamscape of amazing movies and animation. We have it on the poster on the wall behind Aaron. We have it here. We in these little pops in front of us.
It has to be referenced every other episode.
So often. Yeah, it gets in there. It's numbers on here.
Into the Spider-Verse and the Batman or Dark Knight are brought up all the time.
Tom Cruise sneaks into there all the time too.
Yes. But that's it. This was probably definitely the most
referenced thing on the show. Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's so special. It's got the secret sauce. Like it's one of my top 10 movies of all time for sure. It's one of the best animated movies of all time. If I had to pick a favorite Marvel movie, I would pick that movie.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to beat it. And I feel like it's the most Spider-Man movie there is.
You even in just the first one, you get so many Spider-Man.
And somehow it's more of a comic book than even comic books are sometimes, like
just right off the page. I mean, the panels that they do, the little panels, like inside the panels, the movement panels on the screen.
In some cases, in some shots and scenes, like it's even more stylized than a lot of the comics, which is just so cool to see, especially in this one. They dived into a lot of different animation styles that we didn't get to see in the first one.
There's absolutely dozens of animation styles. And what I love about the base animation too is the way that they have those little like ballpoint pen marks across, kind of paying homage or harkening back to their older comic style that had that kind of print across it.
Even just the title sequence where it's like glitching to all these previous versions of the logo and even finishing the title sequence with the stamp of approval that used to be on comics saying that like this is okay for kids to read kind of thing. Like that was really cool. And then the music and stuff, like it all just it's just so good. But before we continue into the story, I want to say we're going to spoil this movie. So if you have not seen Across the Spider-Verse yet, go ahead, save this video and come back after you've seen the movie, because we're going to talk spoilers here.
We're planning to have this episode come out where you've had at least about a week to see the movie. So
yes, for sure.
That's fair warning here. We are going to go across the story, talk about our ratings for the movie, first reactions to the movie. We'll talk about all kinds of things. But the first thing we wanted to get to was some comments from listeners. So the first shout out I wanted to give out is to Michael Pyle. He commented on one of our most recent videos about the writer's strike, referencing the shout out we gave him in that video. He said the closing shout out, let's go. So we're going into the shout out verse.
Michael, welcome to your shout out within a shout out. Thank you so much for listening.
For such a meta movie, I thought this was a great first comment to bring up.
Perfect.
And then we got a few other here that I saved in my phone.
Yeah, we post new episodes, full episodes every Monday and Thursday. We're putting out 2 a week. We're almost at 100 episodes, which still like blows my mind. But then we post short form content on all the platforms. So we're gathering these comments from all over.
Yeah, this one specifically is from YouTube, where I posted a blind ranking of Star Wars characters and got roasted.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah.
The first comment said peak cringe. And I responded thinking I was being funny, saying, at least I'm finally a peak at something. And the response to that from a different person.
Was it a different person?
Who also hated
I thought it was the same person.
The other person said, you managed to peak your own peak cringe with a comment.
That's hilarious.
Damn it.
When I saw that comment, I texted you, peak cringe. It's like, man, that's gold. You did put one of the characters, I forget which one it was, at like number 5 or something. And I was like, oh man, like
that's going to get hate.
Yeah, that's I think you're blocking out some characters that would be above that one, even if you like that character.
I'm so bad at the blind rankings.
Yeah,
it's
so
too
hard.
much of a challenge. Yeah, there's too many characters.
Any other comments you got for us?
I got a couple more. So this one's censored.
Oh Jesus!
It says your podcast looks stupid as with the black cap guy. What a moronic opinion. So this is a comment on a post we did from our episode of The Dark Knight versus the Batman 2022. Which movie is better? I think Aaron's opinion in the video was about how Christian Bale's acting isn't as good as the other cast members, which is a stacked cast. This person just came in with the heat.
Yeah, man.
They hate us out here.
I did really like your response to him, though.
I said, but hey, you're talking about it.
That's right. So, got him.
Hey, free engagement.
Yeah, the haters don't realize that comments, even when they're hateful comments, they only benefit us.
I'd rather have...
We might have to go to therapy because of them.
But we'd rather have the one comment on there than the 0 comments.
That's right. So, we appreciate you.
And then I thought it'd be good to end on a positive note. So, on TikTok... on another video we posted, just kind of commentating the dinner table scene from The Dark Knight, Aaron struggling to get Miguel O'Hara to stand up on the comics.
Maybe we'll go.
Yeah, there you go. So Jack Sari said, love this. And the Iliad 1 said, thank you, I needed this. So some positive comments
there we go.
to turn the vibes around.
That's what I'm talking about, man. I'm glad other people are enjoying our content that we're making. It's definitely a lot of fun.
The thing is, like, we used to stand at the front desk when we all worked together, you, me, and Zach, and talk about the Batman versus the Dark Knight and Christian Bale's Batman versus and all these different things, like comic book related or otherwise, and we just had fun doing it. So that's why we're here now.
Yeah.
And we want other people to join. That's why we post the videos, is to get the podcast out there and get other people on these conversations that we like to have.
I mean, that was literally my selling point to you of doing this podcast, was like, man, we're already having these conversations anyways. I have all of the equipment that we need. Let's just go ahead and start. And then over time, we've just gotten better equipment. We've improved the studio and all that stuff. And
now we're here, and Across the Spider-Verse
almost 100 episodes in.
And we've got this amazing outlet to talk about how we felt about a movie that means a lot to both of us.
Yeah. So are you ready to just kind of dive into the story here?
Let's get it.
All right. So again, spoilers. Okay? You've been warned. I don't know why you're still here. You don't want it to be spoiled.
It's about to get real.
Okay, movie summary. After being Spider-Man for 1 year and 4 months, Miles Morales is reunited with Gwen Stacy and follows her across the Spider-Verse, encountering multiple variants of Spider-Man, known as the Spider Society. They're in the chase of Spot, an underestimated quote-unquote villain of the week, whose body consists of wormholes. Bigger problems arise, causing the Spider Society to turn on Miles. Miles is tired of everyone telling him how his story is supposed to go and travels back across the multiverse to save the people he loves the most.
Everyone's telling me how my story's supposed to go. Nah, I'm gonna do my own thing.
Let's go.
Oh, it's so good.
I feel like in that moment, he was overcome with confidence. You know, just the tone in his voice. I was like, yes, this is what I've been waiting for. Because even in the beginning of this film, especially in the first one, he's kind of hesitant. He's learning. He's young, and he's not quite comfortable being Spider-Man yet. And I feel like in that moment, we got that sense of confidence as he's going up against a very formidable Spider-Man.
Yeah, I saw an interview with Shameik Moore, who voices Miles, and they asked him what his favorite line was from the movie, and he like got into character. Like the voice is pretty similar to his voice, but he got into the Miles voice, and delivered the line, and I was like, it's so good. That's such a good choice for a favorite line.
It really is. I mean, that's like the turning point in the movie, which we'll get to.
Yeah, I feel like you can just hear that in your head though, in like a moment. You know, you're down on your luck. You're like, nah. I'm gonna do my own thing.
Yeah, let's go.
So much swagger.
Yeah, man. Let's just dive into the ratings, and then from there we can kind of talk about the aspects of the movie that we like, and then we can dive into the story a little bit more as well. So this movie obviously came out in 2023, last weekend. It's rated PG. It is 2 hours and 20 minutes, which is quite a bit longer than the first one.
It's apparently the longest animated movie that's ever been produced in America.
Wow, I didn't know that.
It beat out the last record holder by 4 minutes.
Dang, okay.
It takes a lot of work to animate a movie, especially a movie like this, like we talked about with dozens of animation styles, like so much dynamic movement. You watch a lot of anime, and I love anime, but they cut corners with still frames, having the people talk in the still frame, reusing shots. This movie was just smooth, like so many frames, and they made it 2 hours and 20 minutes long, setting that record. That's insane.
Dude, here's another record that it set. IMDb rating 9.1 out of 10. This is the highest rated superhero movie right now on IMDb, beating out The Dark Knight. That is at a 9.0 on IMDb.
When I looked at it at the IMDb Top 100, this was rated number 15.
Well, on the list that I got right here, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is rated number 1 for superhero movies at a 9.1. Dark Knight comes in at a 9.0. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is at 8.4 in the third place spot.
Yo, what list was I on? It's literally number 3 of all time right now.
Yes.
And pushed The Dark Knight into 4.
Yes.
Just last week when we were talking, I was brought up how The Dark Knight was the 3rd highest rated movie on IMDb.
That's what I'm saying,
and it just dethroned it. That's crazy. How many ratings does this movie have? Here's the thing. Here's the thing that you have to understand. Even though we're getting super hyped, I think it has 58,000 ratings already. That's crazy. So you have to understand, though, that movies tend to kind of... their rating isn't really tempered out until,
The Dark Knight has 2.7 million ratings.
Yeah, versus 58,000.
Right.
So you get some of the recency bias out. This movie comes out a little bit. It'll probably drop below The Dark Knight, but it's insane that movies don't do this. Even with that said, with the recency bias, whatever, movies don't just jump to the IMDb top 3 with 58,000 ratings and then drop. That doesn't happen. So
there is no way that this drops, I would say, below 8.4, which is what the first film is at.
I think this movie might be headed for like a 8.9 to 9.1
where it's at.
Yeah. So I think the
9.1 is deserving.
Yeah.
I don't look at that and be like, oh, that's a little overrated there.
Dude, that blows my mind because I literally was just looking this up and I could have sworn it said number 15. For you to tell me that and realize that it's in 3rd right now.
Rotten Tomatoes, the critics have it at a 95% with 264 reviews. The audience score has 5,000 plus reviews and it gave it a 96%. Again, Rotten Tomatoes is percentage of people who would recommend this movie. So out of all of those reviews, 95 plus of those reviews are positive towards this movie, which is really high and consistent across the critics as well as the audience right now. Again, it's Monday, the opening, right after the opening weekend. So it's been out for 4 or 5 days right now. So things will fluctuate a little bit, but right now praises are high and it is well deserved.
Yeah, everyone should be seeing this movie. It's a phenomenon.
I think we should go right into our ratings of the movie here. Now, we break this down into 6 different categories. This helps us kind of take the bias out of our reviews to where maybe certain aspects of the story are rated, or of the movie are rated higher or lower, and that equals a score that maybe wasn't like based off of our recency bias of seeing the movie, of how excited we are. It's a objective score more so.
Yeah, this is a hard thing to be unbiased about, but I do have some complaints.
Okay.
As always.
Ooh, some complaints. All right. Our first category, all of our categories are kind of weighted a little bit differently. This first one is out of 10, and that is the story. Andrew, what did you rank the story for this movie?
So for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, I rated the story as an 8 out of 10, and I can defend that. It's a high score. It's a good score, but I feel like you have
8 out of 10.
I feel like I'm gonna have to defend imperfect scores here. So the reason I give it an 8 out of 10 is just mostly because it kind of annoys me when movies don't tell the whole story, even though it's part of a trilogy. I want, if it's gonna flow from one into the next, I want them to at least start that from the beginning, which the first Spider-Verse movie tells a complete story. So then I want all the other sequels to tell a complete story.
I see what
this
you're
movie just cut off. It cut off at the rising action. I mean, yes, it had a rising action and a climax, sure, but they gave us another rising action and cut off before the climax. Like, this has just felt like it ended in the middle of a sentence, like The Sopranos.
It's a part 2 in the character's whole story, but a part 1 in this specific story. It left us hanging big time. So I totally see what you're saying.
I'm all for a cliffhanger. I really like the ending of Infinity War, and that just made me excited for Endgame, which people are comparing it to, but I find it more similar to the second Pirates movie, which just kind of like ends leading into the third one. Like, it ends where they're just starting a new part of the story. I feel like Infinity War kind of gave a good cliffhanger.
That one has like a beginning, a middle to end.
The ending was that they lost.
Right.
Like, they had lost, so that was it. You know, and I felt like that story was complete in that movie.
Yeah, in this movie, we were definitely like, we're paused on the story.
Smack dab in the middle of the blue.
Yeah. I gave the story a 9 out of 10. I think the last 30 minutes are fire. I said that after the movie, right after our experience in the movie theater. I was like, the last 30 minutes, man, they're so good.
He did say that.
And I also think like the first part of the movie, the 2 hours before that, were really entertaining as well. But then the story really got going towards the end. And normally that's not enough for me to give it such a high score. But this, for whatever reason, I think it's a accumulation of just the overall experience of the movie. It was enough to give it a really high score, even though the beginning was a big setup piece. You know, like, we spent time with Gwen, we spent time with Miles, and then we spent time with them together, explaining why they've been apart and all this stuff. There's a lot of explaining going on. Luckily, through all of that, there was still a lot of action, still a lot of progress, I think, in character development, but not necessarily like story development. And I think that's where you were kind of at a disconnect in terms of giving it a super low rating of an 8 out of 10. How dare you?
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like Gwen found him. You know, he met the Spot. They disrupted a canon event. The Spider People chased him. Now, boom, he's in the wrong universe. And like,
yeah, that could have happened a little quicker.
Yeah, you can surmise a lot of movies that quick when you cut it down. It just felt like there was a lot of action, but not enough. Like, he didn't defeat anybody. And then my big problem too was we had two amazing villains with Miguel O'Hara and Spot, but I feel like I didn't get to fully experience or enjoy either of them as part of this movie because we split focus. We cut from the Spot to right when I was really starting to enjoy him to Miguel O'Hara. And I would have, and they just got back to him at the very end with a little clip, but I would have liked to focus on a villain. I know when I watched Beyond the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse back to back, I'm going to think there's this amazing arc, I'm sure. But right now, what I'm at right now, I just didn't get enough of either.
Yeah, you said before that like we are rating individual movies.
Yeah.
So that's what we have to
go by.
Consider. Our next category is acting. Now, normally this is where we get to see the actors actually perform, but in this one, we only get to hear and we rely on the animation to do the acting. So for this one, out of 10, I gave it a 9 out of 10. What did you give the acting?
I rated it a 9 out of 10 as well, just based off the voice acting. I think that Shameik Moore's Miles Morales is chef's kiss, pitch perfect. He said in an interview that the first time he saw Miles Morales was in some Disney animated cartoon. Then he went and looked him up, and he felt like, he said, like, this is me. Like, this, it looks like somebody saw me on the street and drew me. He felt like it looked just like him. And from then on, like, one of his goals and passions in life was to portray this character because
yeah.
he's an actor. Like this is something he envisioned for himself when he was filming Dope. And man, if he did it, like he's my Miles Morales for sure. I think he is Miles Morales. The voice is so perfect. He's aged the voice with the character phenomenally. It's just and then every side character kills it as well. I have nobody to knock. Haley Steinfeld is so good with her additional focus in this movie. So emotional, the scenes with her dad. It's hard to voice act crying and these sad emotional scenes, and it's stellar in this movie. The family members, Rio and Jeff, and then Miguel O'Hara voice acting is amazing by Oscar Isaac. I thought Ben Schwartzman, I think, is one of the best voice actors in the game. Well, Jason Schwartzman. I'm sorry, I always want to call him Ben because of Ben Schwartz, but Jason Schwartzman, so good. I love him in The Fantastic Mr. Fox, and I think he brought an amazing transference in this movie from like the comedic tone to the seriousness.
Jason Schwartzman plays Spot.
His role as a Spot is so good. Spider-Punk with Daniel Kaluuya. You can go on and on all day.
Yeah, literally all of them. And that's why we both gave it a 9 out of 10.
I don't even know how to pick a favorite.
Yeah, right, exactly. Our next category is cinematography. This is out of 10 points. Now, this is the category that kind of encompasses a lot. Normally, it's composition, but it also includes like the type of lens, the camera, and all that. But that's kind of replaced for the animation style in this movie. Normally, we take into consideration like VFX and stuff like that too. Basically, anything that you see visually. But all that changes for an animated film. And now all we have to go off of is the animation. How unique was the style? Did they show us something that we haven't seen before? And I gave this a 10 out of 10.
Easiest 10 out of 10 I've ever given in my life.
There's no other choice. Like, you can't go any lower. Like, I would have gone up higher if I was allowed to, like, kind of break through the 10 out of 10 barrier, that we have set on these ratings.
This movie is the pillar benchmark for cinematography, for creativity. There were multiple times in my seat where I'm just jaw literally dropping and just throwing my hands up and like, God, that's so beautiful. They're so smart. Like, they're creative. They're thinking like so in depth about everything they put into this movie. And just off the shot alone where Gwen walks around underneath the gargoyle and sits down and the camera follows her upside down, just off that, like, beautiful, stunning.
Or the transitions in the beginning, again, following Gwen, like where she's walking through the streets of New York and then onto the subway and she's going back and forth between being Spider-Gwen and out of her costume.
You can see Miles in the background on her mind, like moving through, like him behind the train.
With animation, you can do things that you can't in live action, or at least it might not come off as smooth. Like having all these glitches and these texts and stuff pop onto the screen. Like, sometimes that's a little cheesy in a feature film, but like in an animation, like in this style, it works so well. And then you're seeing so many different types of styles across all the different universes or emotions that's going on. Like, it's crazy.
Dozens of styles of animation. And then you've got like this impressionistic view they're doing with the emotional scenes with Gwen and her dad, all the way from that to Lego scenes. You've got live action people in this movie. They just did whatever they wanted.
Has everything.
And they pulled it off. Yeah. So gorgeous to watch.
Our next category, Andrew, is sound design. This takes in the soundtrack, the score, the sound effects of the movie, the little flips that they get from their web shooter. That is all encompassed in this category. I gave it an 8.5 out of 10. And I feel like I was kind of like directly comparing it to Into the Spider-Verse. And I think what kind of brought it down from like a 9, because I could see it sitting at 9, but something that brought it down was the soundtrack, I think, was better in the first one. But I think the music and the score, like the original score, was still really good. The sound effects were amazing. I love the little sound that we get, the
prowler.
Oh, so cool.
I ended up giving it actually that 9 out of 10 that you were close to.
Yeah, that's fair. Can't argue it.
The reason being that I see the first movies as a 10 out of 10 for sound design. And I think that this movie actually elevated the score. Like, I felt the emotion of the score even more, especially just right off the rip from the opening with Gwen versus the Vulture. I could feel the intensity of the action ramping up. Like, I could feel it coursing through my veins in the scene. But then I just think that the soundtrack, the songs they chose to put in the movie, just didn't hit quite as hard as they did in Into the Spider-Verse, and that's why I had to dock it to 1 point. Whereas in the first movie, like, it's a 10 out of 10 just because, like, the original score is still incredible in the first movie. The soundtrack is just up there as well. Yeah. Like possibly the best ever.
Yeah. Our next category is set and character design. This is out of 5 points. 5 out of 5. I mean, come on.
Yeah. I agree completely. 5 out of 5. I mean, you name anything in the world of movies, TV shows, short clips, YouTube, anything that has this level of character design, and I don't think you could find something.
Yeah, not only character design, but just like world building.
They literally traveled across 6 different dimensions, 6 different universes.
They're using glitches to tell a story, which we can get in a little bit further. You know, like when they're in alternate universes that they're not supposed to be in. You know, like it's crazy how well they kind of encapsulated all these characters. There's what, 240 different Spider-Man,
something like that, and they captured the cultural values of different Spider-Man in their character designs and in their set design, in the design of their world. So like they captured so much and told a story with it as well. Like looking at Spider-Punk, you get a feeling of his vibe and personality versus looking at Paviter, you know, Spider-Man from that alternate universe. It's awesome.
It's so cool. Our last category here is rewatchability. This is also out of 5. Now, the way we rate this is if someone asked you how many times you want to watch this, or if someone asked you 5 times, how many times do you want to watch this movie? 5 out of 5 again.
Another easy 5 out of 5.
I'd watch this movie right now. I'd watch it right after that again. Like, this movie was fantastic.
I watch it the 5 times you asked, and then I'd bring it up the 6th time.
Yeah. So are we watching this again or what?
Literally, I'm gonna probably go this upcoming weekend and watch it again.
Yeah, I'd be down to go see it again as well. Like, it was phenomenal. Like, it's literally all I've been thinking about the last 2 days since we've seen it. There's just so much going on.
It's a feast amazing for the eyes. Yeah. It's like I could watch it with no sound almost, you know, like it's just so spectacular.
I can watch it frame by frame, you know, like
it's spectacular. It's amazing. It's ultimate.
Yeah. It's all of this. This brings my overall score to a 9.3 out of 10, which is one of the higher scores that we've given on this podcast. Andrew, what did your final score come out to?
My final score came out, and I'm jealous yours is just a tad higher, but mine came to a 9.2.
Still really high.
One of the highest scores we've given.
Yeah, I looked back and I was trying to think of like some other movies that I thought may be just as high, and the one that I found that was tied with my score is The Batman at a 9.3. Another one of our favorite movies on the podcast. This movie is amazing.
It's a stunning achievement. Like I'm looking at it, watching it, and just thinking like, these animators deserve a goddamn medal. Like just watching it, like
give them a raise. Jesus.
And I'm thinking that in like the scene where Miles is talking to his mom, Rio, like a simple scene with no action. I'm like, just look at the like them walking around, them talking, the small movements, their face, they're reaching out to touch him. Like they spared no effort. They left every drop of sweat on the field making this movie, and it's so good.
Everything in the frame is 100% intentional. Even when you're seeing the imperfections, like in that same scene that you're talking about when this skyline is behind them, like there's individual lines that are kind of like out tracing a building that aren't filled in.
Yeah, I just want them to know how much we appreciate that. Yeah. Because like, I feel like a lot of times the small aspects can go unnoticed, but they put so many details in. People are scrutinizing this movie. Like if you zoom in on this movie with a magnifying glass, you can see the base art form has these little touch points, these little dots that are indicative and like paying an homage to the old school style of just drawing an actual comic. Like that, the level of care and love and thought they put into this movie to be like, how can we make it just like a comic? Like they put the panels on screen, they do all these things to make it feel like a comic come to life in the form of a movie. And it's like some of the most care I've seen put into any project, period.
Yeah, the amount of time that it takes just to draw one frame of this movie has to be hours on hours, let alone to animate it all into a motion picture. You know, like there's always something new popping on the screen. You know, like even in the parts that are slower, there's text that are coming on in creative ways, different glitch effects, different overlays, the the style of animation changes per location, per mood. Like there's always something new coming on. This movie is like the TikTok version of movies. You know, like there's always something happening. Even when the story's going slow, you're seeing something else pop on the screen. Your endorphins are high the entire movie. When you're done watching it, you're exhausted from all the excitement that you just experienced.
That's a good way to say it. That's a good way to describe it.
It's wild, man. This movie is crazy. But how does this movie do in terms of revenue, in terms of the box office? This movie had a budget of $150 million, which feels low, in my opinion. You know, like, doesn't it? Like, I would not have been surprised if it was like 250 million, you know? And then the box office, again, this is Monday, June 5th. So we're
been out for 3 days.
Yeah. It's brought in $208 million.
Stunning opening weekend.
I think the first film brought in like $34 million opening weekend.
Well, the first movie topped out in the 300 million, so they're already soaring up to that right away.
They're leagues ahead of this. And unfortunately, this movie's on your box office team.
Yeah, but it didn't make as much money as Mario made in its opening weekend.
I know. So those of you who follow the podcast know that Andrew and I, in the beginning of this year, we drafted 5 movies to be on our team. And at the end of the year, whoever's movies made the most is the winner. So I want to go over a box office update for you, since this is Andrew's most recent movie that has come out. The first movie that come out was the Super Mario Bros., which was on my team. $1.3 billion.
Nobody cares.
I know. The second movie to come out on my team was Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. That one is still in theaters, but it's kind of towards the end of its run. It is right now at $781.8 million. And then The Little Mermaid was the next movie on my list that came out just last week. So that one's only been out for 2 weeks now. And that brought in so far $328.1 million. Not bad. Not as high as I was hoping. But not bad.
It's been in theaters 2 weeks, right? And it hasn't made as much as Fast and the Furious made its opening weekend. So I'm just hoping I can have a chance in this fight.
Yeah. So let's go over. So that brings let's go over to Andrew's list, and then I'll say the total.
Okay.
Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania was Andrew's first movie that came out.
Might as well not even count it.
Bringing in only $476 million. Not bad if it was only the second week, but that movie's not even in theaters anymore. The next movie on his list is kind of his juggernaut right now, and that is Fast 10, which is performing amazing overseas. And that is $604.8 million.
In 2 weekends, I think.
Yes. Maybe 3. 2.
No, I think it might be 3. It might have come out the week
before.
Little Mermaid.
Yeah. And then his next movie is, of course, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, which, again, brought in $208.5 million in one freaking weekend. So that movie, I can definitely see getting to what Fast 10 is at right now. So
208's a really strong opening weekend, and then there's been really, really positive word of mouth for this movie. I've seen everybody online, TikTok, rating it really high, saying go see this movie. It's great.
For sure. I would not be surprised if this is the first or second highest movie on your list. This is definitely going to be bringing in a lot of dollars for you and your team. Andrew and I both still have 2 movies that have not come out yet. Mine's The Marvels, which I'm a little worried about, and Aquaman: The Lost Kingdom, which I am also, again, worried about. Since the year's kind of gone on and we've heard more about the movie, it doesn't seem like it's too good.
I'm a little worried about Barbie and Mission Impossible, because they come out in 2 weeks. Those two come out along with Oppenheimer as well in the same 2 weeks.
And I heard from our friend Justin, who's been on the podcast. He was saying that Tom Cruise is
nervous,
suing or upset with Nolan for basically like locking up all the IMAX theaters for Oppenheimer, and Mission Impossible is supposed to come out around the same time. Also has IMAX viewings.
He's upset that they're sharing theater space with these other huge movies that are going to take over. So the way it works is like a movie will run in a set amount of theaters. Like I think Spider-Verse ran in like 4,000 something theaters, but within that theater, the movie might run within that building, the movie might run in like 3 theaters, IMAX, maybe in a 3D standard. But with these huge movies coming out, they're competing for spots in those different theaters. So
yeah. So the end of the list is still kind of up for grabs of who could win. But right now, the total score for my team is $2.4 billion. And Andrew has a total, again, his movies are newer, has a total of almost $3 billion.
Almost reaching just Mario's box office alone. I would
Yes.
point out. Mario's more than half your box office total right now. It's one movie.
You are correct. Yes. So hopefully my other movies I bring in like a good minimum to like have Mario carry me over the finish line.
Well, I'm in a good mood about Across the Spider-Verse right now.
Oh, yeah.
Let's talk about
As you should.
Across the Spider-Verse
As
again.
you should be.
So did we already discuss the runtime and rating?
Yeah, we already went over that. Now we're going to go into the creators normally this is who is in front and behind the camera, but now there's no one in front. It's the animation team. So Andrew, who made this movie?
So there's 3 directors for this movie, Joaquim Dos Santos, Kemp Powers, and Justin K. Thompson. And then the writers for this movie are Phil Lord, Christopher Miller, and Dave Callahan. Music again by Daniel Pemberton, same individual who did the music on Into the Spider-Verse, knocked it out of the park twice. Editing's by Mike Andrews. And then we got a long list to discuss people who are voice acting on this movie. Everybody's behind the camera. So Shamik Moore voices Miles Morales. Haley Steinfeld is Spider-Gwen. Brian Tyree Henry is Jeff Davis or Jefferson Davis. Luna Lauren Velez is Rio Morales, Spider-Man's mom. Jake Johnson is Peter B. Parker. Oscar Isaac is Miguel O'Hara. Jason Schwartzman as The Spot. Issa Rae as Spider-Woman. Daniel Kaluuya as Spider-Punk. Karan Soni as Paviter Prabhakar. Andy Samberg as Ben Reilly. I didn't know that one until now. Jack Quaid as Peter Parker. Gwen's Peter Parker, to be clear. J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson. And Yuri Lowenthal as Spider-Man PS4, who has like a small little blurb in this movie. But that is the ones that I chose to say here. If you go on IMDb and check it out, this cast list for this movie is really long. Tons of people did additional voice work, and there's other individuals that I didn't fit in here, so I wasn't rattling off names all day and boring your guys' ears.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many people who had a hand in making this movie, and that wasn't even talking about all the editors or animators who worked on this film. This was a Sony production, so kudos to all of them. You guys all made an amazing movie. And it's, as of right now, ranked 3rd in the IMDb's overall movie list. So that's definitely an accomplishment, even if that adjusts over time. Where do we want to start with the story here?
So
there's a lot to dive into. There's a lot of characters floating around, and there's like this overall story arc, but that's going to lead right into the other movie. So where should we go from here?
Do you want to talk about the origin stories for the characters and go right into source code? So we explain who they are first?
Yeah, I think that'll be a cohesive way to explain who's who and then the story. So
we want to go over them in the order that they appear in the story?
Yeah, sure. So our source code segment is where we go over like the background or the origin of the source material for where these stories have come from. A lot of the times when we do source code, it's from the comics, which is where we're getting our source code information for this movie. And you want to go in order of who appears first, and the person who appears first that we have background on is Gwen Stacy.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool for this movie to start out with Spider-Gwen. She goes by, Spider-Gwen, Spider-Woman, or Ghost Spider. If you, like my nephew, watch Spidey and His Amazing Friends, then she might go by Ghost or Ghosty. She was actually a relatively new character. She first appeared in a comic called Edge of the Spider-Verse #2 in just September 17th of 2014. Her origin story is really, really similar to what you guys have already seen. If you've made it this far, I'm assuming you've watched Across the Spider-Verse. But she gets bit by a radioactive spider, just like Peter Parker. She's like a normal high school teenager, 16 years old. She has a band with her friends. The band is made up of, I think, Betty Brant and her sister, and then Mary Jane, and Gwen Stacy. They're called the Mary Janes, so that's an Easter egg in the movie. You see them play in Across the Spider-Verse. She's got a normal teenage life, but she gets these superpowers. And her friend, Peter Parker, who she's also, I think she's friends with Peter Parker and Harry Osborn. So, but Peter is very like entranced by Spider-Woman. He's like inspired by her. So he goes under the experiment like we see in the movie, where he kind of goes on this journey similar to the Lizard, becomes a monster. He ends up dying. And there's actually a comic panel where he says the exact line that he says to Gwen, where he's like, I just wanted to be like you. And then so she wears the mask from then on. Her father, just like in the comics, sees her over the dead body of Peter Parker, and now the police are on a manhunt after Spider-Gwen, but she's vowed to like wear the mask and take on this persona because of her canon event, you could say, from the movie of the death of Peter Parker is one of her canon events. Sometimes Spider-Man has multiple deaths in their lifetime, but she is a really cool take on Spider-Man, and pretty much everything that we see in her origin story in this movie up until the appearance of the interdimensional effects is basically her origin in comics, which is really cool, the accuracy.
Yeah, I loved in the movie where she kind of webs up all of the police and then goes upside down right in front of her dad and's like, so how's the chase going for me? I love that. It was just, it felt very like teenage rebel vibe, of like, you tell me no, and here I am.
The other cool thing about Spider-Gwen, too, is like Spider-Man's very acrobatic, but she's a version of Spider-Man that very much like hones in on that. So she, like in the first movie when she says, can you leap and swing with the skill of a trained dancer? Like she is very graceful.
Yes. The next character that we're going to go over in source code and who shows up next in the story is Miles Morales. Now, I'm going to go kind of more into the backstory of how he was inspired and created rather than how he actually got his powers, since the whole first movie goes over that pretty much. So Miles Morales in 2011 interview with USA Today, Ultimate Spider-Man writer Brian Michael Bendis stated that Donald Glover's appearance in the season 2 premiere of Community wearing Spider-Man pajamas inspired the character Miles Morales. Bendis and Italian artist Sarah Pacelli introduced Miles Morales and in the 4th issue of Marvel's miniseries Ultimate Fallout. Miles later starred in Ultimate Spider-Man. Donald Glover made an appearance as Aaron Davis in Spider-Man Homecoming, who is Miles Morales' uncle. And then he also showed up as a variant in Across the Spider-Verse as the Prowler, who is also Aaron Davis. So that's kind of how Miles Morales came to be all the way back in 2011, which is relatively recent and a very quick turnaround to get a full featured film for the character.
I mean, and Spider-Gwen, I think, has one of the quickest turnarounds as well, because she appeared even after Miles Morales in 2014, and then she's in a movie in 2018. So really cool. But
this was a way to like kind of revamp Spider-Man. Like he's been this teenage character for 80 plus years, and it's like, okay, like over those years, he's got to be at least 30, right? Like he's got to age a little bit. So this was a unique way to introduce different heritage, different background, and kind of give a new spin on Spider-Man. He also has some unique powers that Spider-Man doesn't have, with invisibility and electricity as well.
Bioelectricity, the Venom Strike. A few key differences, though, or maybe not even key, but a few interesting differences that I noticed looking into Miles' backstory. In the comics, Miles' uncle, the Prowler, Aaron Davis, goes into Oscorp Industry and does a heist, and he accidentally brings home the spider that bites Miles. Miles is going to visit his uncle against his parents' wishes because his parents know he's a criminal, and he gets bit by the spider rather than in the subway station. And he was meant in that universe, in the Ultimate Universe, which I think is Earth. I think it's Earth 161, just like in the movie. He's meant in that universe to replace Peter Parker when he dies. Originally, Miles, unlike other versions of Spider-Man, Miles doesn't want to take on the superhero role, but he kind of feels like this responsibility and guilt when he's not able to be there when Spider-Man dies, and then he takes on the role and persona of Spider-Man. And there's this kind of weird story for Miles, this arc for Miles, where although the birth of his character is in that Earth 1610, he ends up in the canon universe. In Marvel Comics, this is Earth 616, which in the animated movie, that's where Peter B. Parker is from. Peter B. Parker is from Earth 616, the main universe. For a long time, people thought that was the MCU, that the MCU is Earth 616, but it's basically been confirmed now by this movie that the MCU is Earth 19999. So,
which kind of corrected and went against what was said in Doctor Strange: Multiverse of Madness.
yeah.
So a little,
because they had previously said that that MCU was Earth 616 in that movie, but it's not.
They got you.
Yeah, the girl who plays Miss Marvel actually said this, and I think she was getting questioned on like a red carpet somewhere. She said this already, that she thinks it's not Earth 16, it's Earth 19999.
And now it's confirmed, at least by Sony.
At least by Sony. But Miles is a really, really cool character. I'm glad that he was created. I'm glad he was inspired by Donald Glover, who is a person I love. I've watched all of Community, love that show. I've watched Donald Glover stand up. If you're not familiar with Donald Glover, he also goes by the moniker Childish Gambino. He also has a show called Atlanta. He's an awesome, awesome creative in our time. And I think that it would have been really cool if he got to play Spider-Man, because back in the Community days, he was in really good shape. He was young. He would have been a good candidate for Spider-Man, but at least we get this creation from that inspiration, from the Twitter trend of Donald for Spider-Man. We still get something out of it, which is this awesome whole new world that we have of Miles Morales.
Yeah, maybe we'll get to see him actually play Prowler in the MCU.
It would be awesome.
That would be super cool.
At least, give the man something.
Yes. And they already have.
Yeah.
I mean, more than most who are in this kind of situation, you know. Now, the next character that we're going to kind of dive into is one of the villains that show up, and that is Spot. And I believe you have some information of who Spot is.
So who is the Spot? A lot of people probably haven't seen the Spot or aren't familiar with him. I wasn't too familiar. I had only seen him in the 90s animated cartoon for Spider-Man, which he has an episode in that, which is pretty cool. One of the better episodes, in my opinion. Spot, the character voiced by Jason Schwartzman you see in the movie, is the character with the all-white body with the little black holes in him. He first appeared in...
Looks like Rorschach with his...
But the whole body.
Face with the...
Rorschach from Watchmen. So Spot first appeared in the Spectacular Spider-Man number 97 in December of 1984. So not as old as Spider-Man, who first appeared in the 60s, but quite a bit older in comics history than the characters we just discussed, our heroes. He appeared in that issue, but he didn't take the moniker of the Spot until the following issue in January. He is created by Al Milgrom and Herb Tramp. He's a scientist who, in some iterations, he was working for Roxxon, but in his original iteration, as in the last movie, he was working for Kingpin. But in the comics Origins, he was trying to replicate the powers of a villain called Cloak, and he accidentally created this interdimensional portal. When he interacted with it, it disfigured him and also gave him the ability of interdimensional travel. So although, like in the movie, how he's upset that his body's been morphed and disfigured, he got this awesome power, these enhanced abilities, increased agility, speed, and strength, plus this super OP power of creating and opening dimensional portals. So he can also, it's shown in the animated series as well, he can go into his portals and kind of enter like this void with a whole bunch of portals, access to all different dimensions. It's kind of like this, we're going to see, it's a world-breaking power, but he's a really, really interesting character with a cool power, because I'm kind of tired of seeing the last two Marvel villains have just been somebody who has tech that lets them basically have telekinesis. And like, give me something creative. Like the Spot is something creative. He's dangerous, he's interesting, and he's got a cool power.
It's also a villain that doesn't have the same powers as the hero. The hero.
Yeah, that's a trope as well.
Is refreshing, you know. Not to say that all of those villains are bad that kind of line up, you know, like Spider-Man has a few villains that are just like him or very,
Venom,
very similar.
Or Carnage.
And they're good villains. Another one is Spider-Man 2099, who is very similar but has some differences, who makes an appearance in this movie, voiced by Oscar Isaac. And I thought he was really cool in this film, especially when he comes in and he's fighting the Vulture in the beginning, you know, and his webs are like neon red and they're glowing. Like, it just looks so cool. His suit looks amazing. So I have some background information on him if you're ready to dive into Miguel O'Hara.
Hit me. Who's Miguel O'Hara?
All right, he's created by Peter David and Rick Leonardi in 1992. Miguel O'Hara is an Irish-Mexican geneticist. Did I say that right the first time? From an alternate universe of Earth 928. How do they keep track of all these numbers? They're so random. In 2099, which is after the end of the heroic age. So kind of no more superheroes. So Spider-Man is no longer there. Miguel works for Alchemax. I think that's how you say
Alchemax?
it. Alchemax?
Alchemax, I think.
Okay. Where he is a head genetics. He is the head of a genetics program that is researching I'm sorry, guys. It's late here. Alterations of animal genetics inspired by Spider-Man, again, who is no longer alive. Alchemax, right?
Alchemax.
Alchemax.
It's either Alchemax or Alchemax.
Alchemax goes against Miguel's moral code by using a criminal as a test subject. This causes him to quit. However, the head, Tyler Stone, poisons him with an addictive drug called Rapture for quitting. Once the drug binds into his system, he would need this for the rest of his life to function. So Miguel's forced to continue to work there. Miguel tries to genetically counteract the drug, but things go wrong, resulting in him developing spider-like abilities. Now, his powers are very similar to Spider-Man, but some differ. So he's got super strength proportional to a spider, speed, stamina, reflexes, agility, and enhanced durability. He has fangs, which secrete paralyzing venom. He has retractable talons in his hands and feet. That's how he holds on to things. He can shoot webs, very similar to Spider-Man, but it seems like he actually makes the substance that comes out. He has enhanced healing, enhanced sensory of sight, enabling him to see in the dark. He can see at greater distances. He can track faster moving objects, which is valuable because he does not have spider sense. But this leaves him more sensitive to light, and that's why his eyes are kind of protected by this black mask that he wears. His costume also gives him some abilities because it's made of an unstable molecules that are resistant to tears. That way his talons don't rip through his suit. His suit also gives him low-level anti-gravity particles, enabling him to glide across air currents, and he can also use the suit to create camouflage, basically rendering him invisible, similar to Miles Morales. Now, we didn't get to see a lot of those powers in this movie just yet. We got to see 2 or 3 frames of him taking off his mask and him showing his fangs, but then he kind of got caught by the helicopter, so he quickly put his mask back on. 1, because it was really bright, the spotlight was right on him, and 2, probably because he didn't want to get caught on film eating someone. We didn't get to see him in camouflage. We kind of got to see him float around a little bit and kind of glide through the air. That was kind of it. Like you said in the beginning, like we didn't get to see the full like character arcs of these villains. As soon as we got comfortable and excited about the spot, we switched over to
Miguel O'Hara.
Yeah, and then the movie ended kind of in between, and we're kind of left on edge here, you know, waiting to see what happens with these characters. But from what we got to see of both The Spot and Spider-Man 2099, I'm very excited for these characters.
Yeah, and we mentioned for like all these characters super strength. And I think a question people might ask is to what degree, because super strength could vary a lot. I read somewhere for Spider-Gwen that it said she could lift 10 tons, which converts to 20,000 pounds. So it's a lot.
Just a little bit.
It's a lot of super strength.
Also, I don't know if you noticed, but Miguel O'Hara's boy squats. Man, he does some deadlifts. His glutes. Woo,
he does the glute bridges.
That's right, dude.
Hip thrusters with the
yes. He is
with a building on either side.
He's stacked back there, if you know what I'm saying. You know, like he's
caked up.
That's right. So through these characters, we kind of talked about the story a little bit, but one of the big things that happens in this film is a canon event. Can you explain what the canon event is?
Yeah, so like a pop culture term or a term in the zeitgeist is canon. Something is canon if it's in keeping with the main arc of the story. It's a term that we use for anime. It's a term we use related to comics. When they put out a new video game for Star Wars, you say, is this game canon? Which means, is it contributing to the main story? Is it in the same universe? Is it part of the overall storyline of the Skywalker saga?
And if not, it's not canon.
Yeah, and if it's not canon, then it's just its own universe. It's its own thing. It's separate. So that's the meaning of canon. That's what this is inspired by. A canon event is something in this world of Across the Spider-Verse where that event has to occur in order, basically, for the time-space continuum to not be destroyed. So canon events happen to Spider-Man where they might have a tragic loss. They might have a tragic event occur in their life. And in this storyline, they have to keep the fabric of the universe together by maintaining the sanctity of the canon events. If they disrupt them and save that person's life, alters the time flow, it alters the way the events were, quote unquote, supposed to happen.
Yeah, so there's like certain checkpoints that all Spider people kind of have to go through. We got to see that within the webs. Like you saw the actual spider bite. We actually saw a little web picture of a bunch of Venoms. So maybe every Spider-Man needs to have a version of Venom. And then, of course, we got to see the tragedy that all happens. And that's kind of where these canon events are focused in this movie in particular.
I feel like Miles and Gwen already had their tragedy. Like, damn, he's off them.
Right?
Gwen had Peter Parker die and Miles had his uncle Aaron Davis die. And
yeah.
I think that there's an instance in comics where his mother dies, Rio Morales. I think in the original Ultimate comics that you referenced where he started out. But he ends up back with his family because he starts in Earth 1610 in that storyline. There's like a cataclysmic event that basically his world collapses, that reality ceases to exist. He escapes from that and gets transitioned now to Earth 616, and his friends are there and his parents are both alive there. And that's where he takes place in like the Venom Wars and Secret Wars and all this other storylines, Civil War, what have you. So he comes into like the quote unquote main universe. 616 is like the central thread of realities in comics. So maybe anything could happen. You know, the comics that inspired this story are all over the place, clearly, from what I just said. So this is a spoiler for Beyond the Spider-Verse, potentially, but we know in the game of Spider-Man PS4 that Jefferson Davis dies. So his dad could die in the next movie. He could break the canon and save his dad. Maybe his mom dies instead. Maybe he saves both his parents. But tradition...
At the part where they were chasing Spot, both Miles and his dad, I leaned over to you in the film and I'm like, oh no, does his father die here? You know, and you were like, well, that happens a lot in his story because we both played the game and all that stuff. And I leaned over to my wife. I was like, Brooke, he might die because she doesn't handle deaths in movies very well. So I was like trying to give her the warning. But that ended up being this the like kind of climax of the movie of like, this is what we're trying to stop from happening. And that's where all the Spider Society kind of turns on him to try to stop him from going back home to save his dad, who's supposed to die in 2 days. That's kind of the whole arc of the movie with that conflict.
Well, they're trying to scare us a lot. In that scene, they scare us with Jefferson Davis falling. There's a line in the movie that scared me where they said, Spider-Man's always trying to catch Gwen Stacy. And like, you think about it, literally catch. Like Gwen Stacy in Amazing Spider-Man 2 falls to her death and dies because he can't catch her.
Yeah.
The way it's phrased in the movie is like he's trying to catch her, trying to catch
romantically,
yeah. trying to catch her attention. But I don't know. I was worried something was going to happen to Gwen based off that double entendre. So I hopefully we are going to get a lot of questions answered in Beyond the Spider-Verse.
Yeah.
But that scene definitely made me nervous when he was falling at the construction site. I didn't realize for a little while that was the torn site of the Super Collider from the first movie.
Yeah.
So many good callbacks in this movie, by the way, to the first movie.
There's so many Easter eggs, and like we can't go over all of them.
I want to go over some of our favorites.
Yes.
Pick
but
some
there's
favorites.
There's literally so many. It's ridiculous.
The movie is a Russian nesting doll of Easter eggs, just within themselves over and over.
Not only from the previous movie Into the Spider-Verse going into Across the Spider-Verse, but also just all the Easter eggs expanding outside of these movies into other Spider-Man and superhero movies and bringing them all into this one story, this one universe, or these multiple universes. I think my favorite one has to be the Spider 42. And that's the original spider that bit Miles in the first movie. And in the first movie, the part that I don't think anyone really caught on to until now is that spider was glitching. And when that happens, they're not supposed to be in that universe.
But we didn't learn that till later in the movie. So it's hard to catch. Unless until you look closer at rewatch.
Right.
You learn that with Peter B. Parker. So
right. So I didn't realize that until watching this movie. And then they carried that into this movie when he scans himself in to transfer back to his home universe, and it scans the DNA of that spider as Spider 42, which is not his actual universe from where he is from. So now he's in this alternate universe where things are all flipped around. And I think that's so cool of the long-term implications of this little detail that was overlooked by myself and so many other people of just being like, it's a glitchy spider. We're watching a glitchy Spider-Man movie, but like everything literally has a meaning and a purpose. And it's really cool to see all of that come together.
There's so many Easter eggs. I mean, the number 42 itself, I think, is an Easter egg related to Jackie Robinson, the first African-American to play professional baseball. And then you've got Miles Morales. He's now an African-American icon as a superhero. He's this awesome representation as Spider-Man. And then that comes... the spider says the number 42 on it. You can see the 42 broken off the billboard on the ground around him in the first movie. It's the number of the universe in this movie.
And I love how they like hinted at that when he scanned to transfer to the other universe. And it's like literally right in front of you. Like, hey, 42. Like, we know that's the wrong spider. That spider wasn't supposed to bite him. They've been telling us the whole movie.
And it's also...
But like, I didn't connect the dots that he'd be in the alternate universe until like it was kind of revealed.
Yeah, until they wanted us to know, which is awesome. I love when you look back and you can see how obvious.
Yeah, it's like such an obvious twist. Like it's literally right there in front of us. But I didn't catch on to it.
But there's other clues related to the spider too. Like for example, when the Spot's telling the story of how he teleported the spider into the universe that bit him, you can see Miles G. Morales from the end of the movie. You can see him in the corner of the screen where the spider was on his desk just about to bite him before he teleported it away, and it bit the Miles of our story in Earth 1610. And then once Peter, the Peter Parker of Earth 1610, voiced by Chris Pine, sees Miles for the first time after he's bitten, he gets this sense of him as Spider-Man where his background colors are like yellow and purple, Prowler colors that then transition into blue and red Spider-Man colors, symbolic of the changing of his fate from growing into Miles G. Morales' life and being
Prowler,
taking on the mantle for his uncle Aaron Davis, but now his fate has transitioned because they've taken the canon event and changed it. So that Miles G. Morales was going to be the Spider-Man of his universe of 42, and it's so cool, all these small details.
Yeah, is there any other little Easter eggs that you want to go over before we move on to our last segment, which is backseat directing?
Oh God, there's so many. I'll try to pick a few. I really like the references to the first movie. I like when they show Jefferson Davis at the top of that big thing at the super collider and he's going to jump and then they show him running down the stairs. Reference to when Miles did the exact same thing in the first movie when he's trying to jump across the buildings. I like when they go into Foam Party, which is the coffee shop they cover in Bubbles when he's fighting Spot. Again, a reference to the first movie where they drive past it on the way to Miles' first day at school. There's a little note in his book when he's looking through the pictures of Gwen that says 3Pac, their universe's version of 2Pac. Hammer Space reference.
There's a bus ticket in that same notebook to the bus ride that they
went on in the first movie
together in the first movie.
The Vulture, Leonardo da Vinci, version of the Vulture pulls his wing out of quote unquote hammer space, which is a reference to the first movie, how Peter Parker is able to pull a hammer out of this void of unlimited space.
Yep.
You've got
also like the little calculations that are like being popped on screen as he's like doing the actions. Yeah. That's so cool.
One that I think is really, really cool is when you look at the memorial graffiti that they have for both Aaron Davis and Jefferson Davis in the alternate universe. The saying on it is "rest in power," which was originally first used for this very popular graffiti artist back in the day. Is where the term originated from, and "rest in power" is often used for people who, you know, maybe they've been disenfranchised, or maybe they dedicated a life to activism, or they had some form of prejudice towards them in their lifetime. Some people with some kind of struggle related to it is where "rest in power" kind of originates from. And it's this iconic phrase, but it also in this movie has a special double entendre, because the saying for Spider-Man is, with great power comes great responsibility. And so you get "rest in power," this beautiful marriage of a comic book storyline and this cultural movement. And it's just so cool to see something like that in a PG kids movie like pop up on the screen. I feel like it's very like culturally powerful.
There's so much that went into this. I mean, we've been talking about it with all the animation details, but then also how it's like connecting to all these other double meanings and stuff. Like, how did they think of all this stuff?
I don't know.
You know, like
the continuity, the attention to detail. The other thing that also might be my favorite, because I love them all so much, is I noticed, because I just watched Into the Spider-Verse right before heading to the theater, the way they stack a comic every time a new character shows up, they say, "Let's do this one more time." And Miles' comic pops down, and then they do the same thing for Miguel O'Hara. The last one on the top of the stack of the comics in Into the Spider-Verse is Miles Morales wearing his sick-ass jacket with the black suit on. And then when they smack another comic down on top of that one in this movie, it's on top of the one from the last movie. They're continuing the stack from the first movie as though it's all one continuous story, which it is, which is awesome.
Yeah, super cool. And again, we could talk about these literally for the next 3 hours.
Oh, one more one.
All right, for the last time.
Aaron keeps trying to stop me. There's a line in the movie after they talk about Miguel with the giant like werewolf-like teeth, where he says, "Oh, a good vampire, I'd pay to see that." That's a reference to Morbius in the Sonyverse. Yeah.
Man, so many. Let's move on. So this podcast isn't 4 hours.
We could literally do 240 of them just referencing all the individual Spider-Man. There's a popsicle chasing Spider-Man reference to the first movie, the So-So popsicle.
All right, stop it. We have to move on. Our next segment is backseat directing. We do this on every episode where we're reviewing a movie, and this is where we put ourselves in the director's seat and we talk about what we would praise of this movie and keep, and then also what we would like to possibly change in the movie. So for me, I pretty much only have one little critique, and then the rest is everything that we've already said. Do it again in the next movie. And my little critique is increasing the volume of the dialogue. I was having a hard time hearing what the characters are saying, especially in the beginning when Gwen is playing the drums. There's no subtitles, and I'm old, and I like to read as I'm listening, but I also saw a forum thread where other people were saying the same thing, that it wasn't just me.
You had to legitimize your concerns?
Yes. I actually just kind of came across it when I was scrolling. I didn't look for it specifically.
Sure you did.
I did.
Yeah.
I promise.
Okay. That's just how I sound when I believe you.
You want to fight? But no, like other people were also saying like it was just a little bit hard to hear the dialogue. So just maybe raising that volume up just a little bit so we can hear it a little bit better. I thought maybe it was just our theater that was a little bit low, but maybe not if other people were experiencing the same thing. But that's something very small about the movie, I'd say. What do you have for backseat directing?
Mine's pretty big. It's that I would change the ending of the movie entirely. I wouldn't want it to cut off like partway through. I think that the movie maybe could have ended more in an arc where the Spider Society is going after him and he escapes, and then somehow the order of events lines up where he goes up trying to stop Spot after that. Spot wins, and it ends on, like Infinity War, maybe ends in a loss, but it ends Spider-Man at an all-time low, and then we're like, oh, we got to see Beyond the Spider-Verse to see his get back, and that's I would have wanted a more complete arc. That'd be my change. And we've obviously sung this movie's praises absolutely to death, so our pros for this movie have been said a dozen times. Animation's phenomenal, voice acting. Animation's phenomenal again. I'll say it twice because it's probably the best animation of all time.
Did you notice how good the animation was?
Oh, it was great.
Mind blowing.
So many appearances by beloved characters I wouldn't trade out. The live action appearance of Toby and Andrew.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I would have liked to seen a little bit more of PS4 version.
Me too.
Spider-Man, like him, like actually interacting, maybe swinging around a little bit. I mean, the new game's about to come out this year. Like, I feel like I was expecting it to be more, as like promotion for the game.
Another Easter egg: the Spider-Man PS4 video game's being played by Genki when you see him go into Vision's Academy through the window.
Yep.
But a concern I had was that Miles, his choice to refuse to sacrifice one life, to say it's the whole universe versus one life, and Miles to say I can do both. That is a decision I think every Spider-Man would make. And Sierra, my fiance, said it kind of takes away from the other characters. She said it took their main character energy away from the other Spider-Men for them to be kind of all on board this kind of cultist train of thought of conformity, which, good thing we got Daniel Kaluuya in there, Spider-Punk for the nonconformity. My dog can't even be contained to one style of animation. He's so nonconformist.
Yeah.
But he's literally like newspaper clipping animations. Fucking love it.
Yeah, and he's animated on like 6? Like every 6 frames he moves. Like in
awesome.
The first Spider-Verse movie, we see Miles animated on 2s, where every second frame he moves. For him, he's like even more of a glitch, in between his movement, which kind of makes him stand out even more, which again goes against the grain, against the mold, which is his whole character.
But for my complaint, I came up with a way to defend it in my own brain. I understand that they're not making what I consider to be the Spider-Man choice, which is they're basically deciding to sacrifice people for the greater good. They're like, that person's meant to die. But I think Spider-Man needs to try to save everyone and try to force the round piece to fit into the square hole and say, I would rather break the universe than sacrifice a life.
We have Peter B. Parker, who says to Miles, like, I wouldn't have my baby if it wasn't for you. And I think there's 2 meanings there. He wouldn't have had the baby because of Miles, being that he loves Miles and enjoys the presence of the child. Like, he wouldn't be a good dad if he didn't have to help Miles. But then also, he wasn't supposed to have that baby. In his world, he broke up with Mary Jane. But because of Miles
changed the fate.
They got back together and he had a baby, which shows that something can break the canon and still happen. And the world will still be there. The universe will still be there.
And that it can be a better place for it, because Mayday is going to be this awesome person. She's going to be a superhero.
Right.
And I think that the only way I'm justifying it in my brain for now is that all of those other Peters have lost, for the majority, have lost their Uncle Ben, and that Uncle Ben has said, with great power comes great responsibility. And Miles didn't have that. He might have heard that from the other Spider-Man, but that's a completely impacting scenario for your life. He didn't have an Uncle Ben. So they understand.
That's how Peter B. Parker justifies
They
it.
explain that they've had their canon event, but they understand that losing their Uncle Ben has saved so many other lives. So I guess we have to accept that explanation that the movie gives us. But it's hard for me to accept Spider Society. I understand the shoes Gwen's in. Gwen feels like an outcast from her own reality, and she's scared to go back there. And she's a child.
With all that said, this movie did leave us on this cliffhanger that has me extremely excited and anticipating the next movie. And I mean, yes, it didn't have like that complete story that you're looking for, but like, I'm very invested in where this story is going to go. And I feel like I'm willing to wait to see that whole like 4, maybe 5 hour story that we're going to get. Overall, I mean, we could talk about this movie all day long. I would love to do another podcast on this movie sometime soon, maybe going into more detail of certain scenes or different aspects of it that we liked, breaking down more of the Spider-Man characters that showed up. I mean, we didn't even really talk about one of my favorites, and that's the Indian.
Peter.
Yeah. He was amazing.
He was so good.
Fantastic. The voice acting was...
Dude, that's Dopinder from Deadpool.
Yes, I know. Yeah, he was one of my favorite Spider-Man that we saw.
He was my favorite, and then
I just wake up like this.
Spider-Punk just won me over time. I love him. Hobie's so cool.
Yeah, so Again, everyone, thank you so much for watching and supporting the podcast. Go ahead and leave us a comment, and maybe we'll shout you out on the podcast, whether it's good or bad. We appreciate it. We post new episodes every Monday and Thursday, and we're posting every single day on all the other platforms. So be sure to check us out. Thanks for supporting. Make sure you share us with a friend. And that's a wrap.